All right, so the semester has come to an end. So for this final project, picking three themes that I thought were important was extremely difficult for me. I felt like everything correlated and built on each other. So picking three was hard, but the next few slides will identify those topics, how they relate to Harry Potter, and how I will be using them in the future. Alright, as I said previously, it was really hard to pick three specific themes or components that I felt were the most important. So I kind of did three umbrella themes. I felt like the family roles, diversity and rituals, and family and health really encompassed everything that I learned this semester. Everything really connected and built on each other and integrated well. So I hadn't read the Harry Potter books before this semester. I'd seen the movies, but I was like that gap year where it's like I had peers that were reading it, but it wasn't something that interested me at the time. So it was interesting reading them this semester, and using my background in education and pulling that stuff in for information and how my nursing career has brought communication in. Definitely different components this semester, and I learned a lot. So, family roles is the first umbrella topic I picked as really important this semester. So, looking at the different mother-father roles and how dark and light communications impact those roles. Looking at that mother figure, Harry doesn't have either role really biologically identified. I mean, both his parents are deceased. So, looking at the mother, you have Aunt Petunia, who is fulfilling that mother role for Dudley, but not really for Harry. So it's, even though she's had Harry since he was very little, it's not the same mothering, even though they're in the same household. But then you have Professor McGonagall, who is definitely Harry's disciplinarian and educator. So she is disciplining his actions, but teaching him lessons to learn from them. And she definitely fits that role really well. And then you have Mrs. Weasley, who is definitely that nurturer and the aspect of Aunt Petunia that Harry hasn't gotten to see firsthand. So the person who's going to cook, clean, give you love and attention, and give you gifts. She gives Harry that attention and that sense of belonging that is missing in the Dursleys' home. Then you have the father figures. So obviously Professor Dumbledore, Sirius Black is really the first father figure because he's Harry's godfather. So he has that label, that identification of the father role for Harry, but it's not seen till later in the series. Hagrid does play some sort of father role, although it's more of a father-friend role, which is important to have, but it definitely is a different aspect for what Harry needs. Obviously, Professor Dumbledore is an important aspect as that father figure when Harry gets to Hogwarts. I put dark communication in this slide because Professor Dumbledore is the king of kings of dark communication. And if Professor Dumbledore hadn't used that form, the series would drastically be changing in different directions. And I think that learning when to use that form of communication is definitely something that fathers are good at, and that's something that I can take in the future. Learning how to communicate with light and dark communication to best fit a patient's needs and even my family's needs, because I really hadn't identified either one of those components as being separate before. So it was nice to learn. The second umbrella theme was diversity in rituals, which I felt like really built on the family roles theme. So looking at that nuclear family, it kind of imploded for Harry. He's his own little island, but he gets to see into the nuclear family of the Dursleys. Even though he lives in the same household, they really separate him. They really segregate him as not really a part of the nuclear family. When Harry gets to Hogwarts, he gets to see the Weasleys' nuclear family, as well as the Granger and even the Malfoy nuclear family, as those parents and children unit. It is nice to see that I hadn't really identified it before, an intentional family. And the Sorting Cat kind of does it for every student at Hogwarts. So you have that intentional family of the Gryffindor house that Harry, Hermione, and Ron are all part of. And Hermione, Ron, and Harry can create their own intentional little bond of best friends through thick and thin. We're going to work through and solve all these mysteries together. Even the Quidditch team that Harry's a part of, and Ron is eventually too, is their own intentional family. They're the unit, they're the team that's going to play the games and do what they need to do. It was definitely something that I hadn't thought of, and in the future, as the nurse sitting in, going into a patient's room, understanding that the member that is sitting in a chair might not be biologically related to the patient, but they're there in a role as a family member, that they're important enough to be present in that person's life in the time when they're ill. Looking at rituals was difficult. That whole task was hard for me, as it's hard to identify specific rituals for my family. But looking at real life and the Wizarding World, the ritual of school for children, you start in the fall, you have Christmas break off, you go back in the spring, you have summers off. That's definitely a real ritualistic routine that happens in real life and in the Wizarding World. And then Quidditch I put on here because, you're encouraged when you're young to join something, join a team, have this ritual routines, set place, training, schedules, practice, games. That happens in real life and in the Wizarding World, so it's nice to see those rituals and routines. There's Christmas, getting Christmas presents. When Harry gets his first sweater from Mrs. Weasley, it was nice to see that ritual, which he hadn't seen previously, come to play. So, in the future, really looking at understanding and identifying somebody who has maybe barriers that aren't, and rituals that are different than mine, but identifying their needs to fit those rituals. Lastly, my component is family and health. So, illness is, especially if it's a serious diagnosis, is not something that's really talked about. They mention it kind of under the radar, but like when Hermione got petrified, they didn't really explain what happened, how it happened, because it was a mystery. They didn't know the beast or where it was coming from. But you don't really see people in the series or read about the people in the series really getting sick. So illnesses is not really talked about, but death is very much a large component of getting sick, and that death is inevitable. And if Ron and Harry hadn't done everything they could for the Chamber of Secrets, Hermione might not be alive for the rest of the series. And that would have drastically changed the events. And so, learning that death is unavoidable, the amount of Horcruxes that Voldemort has created to prolong his life, and his fear of death was very interesting. And going back to the family role slide, Dumbledore withholding the information of that prophecy for Harry, understanding that somebody's going to have to die because both of you can't live at the same time, definitely would have changed events. And even at the end, learning about you're going to have to die, like you're going to have to fight to the death, and understanding that death is a part of life, I think is a big takeaway, and that it's okay to talk about it, and using it by its term. You're going, like, it's death. Things are going to end. I think is my biggest takeaway, and not to be afraid of it, because it is a part of life.